Hello, Wisdom Seekers. Welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live podcast and our weekly episode. And I appreciate all of you that will join us today. And I appreciate audience not only from LinkedIn, but from also Facebook and YouTube, and hope to hear from everyone from any channel on comments, questions. And we are again today with a special guest, my friend and colleague, and Sam Delgado. And just as we always start our show off, I wanted to remind you of a couple of things. Please let us know where you are joining from. Type in the comments what part of the world. It's always interesting to see. And then just a reminder of the podcast perspective of what wisdom is. And it starts with knowledge. It's a journey, and we gain knowledge and insight, facts, figures, and so on. And then the next step in that process is that we take the knowledge and begin to apply it in various settings in our life and our situations. Good morning, or hello, Petra. I keep forgetting that it might not be morning everywhere. My apologies. Excuse me. And Petra is joining from Germany, and Mehdi from Morocco. Welcome, Manmeet. Good to see you again. Appreciate you joining us today. And so anyway, the second step in that journey is taking knowledge that we've gained and apply it in our lives and in our situations. And then the third step in that process, welcome, Virginia, friend, colleague, glad to see you. And so the third step in this journey to wisdom is to then take our knowledge and our understanding and begin to see it in a much broader, bigger perspective, looking at it especially outside of ourselves and gaining that perspective so that we can understand and appreciate how what we know and what we apply and understand and how it affects other people and the world around us. And for those that are spiritually oriented, I like to put it in this context that wisdom is seeing things from God's eyes. And that means seeing things from his perspective, the bigger perspective outside of ourselves, and in light of what we're created to be, who we are created to be, so that we can ultimately be able to help people and to grow ourselves, and lastly, to pass our wisdom along to other folks, because quite often we gain wisdom from experience and time and struggle, which is all part of it, but there is opportunity if we take advantage and if we are part of it, and that is to share with others and learn from each other. I know each episode that we have with the Wisdom Seeker Live, I am pleased to learn something myself from either the guests that are on or the participants in the podcast. So without further ado, again, Sam is a former educator, colleague, friend, somebody that I've worked with over the years in the education arena. And so let's bring Sam on. Hello, Rosemary. Good to see you from down under Australia. Thanks for being here again. So Sam, welcome aboard, and looking forward to another roughly hour of good conversation to help make wise choices in education. If you don't mind, introduce everyone again a little bit, tell them about you, so that those that didn't see you last week we'll have a little insight into who you are.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you again, Kevin, for this wonderful opportunity. I'm so excited to have folks from all around the world participating. Yes, as Kevin was mentioning, I've been in education now for the last 10 years, and that was something that kind of ended up being an unexpected adventure because I initially started career-wise anyway in the construction industry and construction management. But education has really been, being in academia, an eye-opening experience for me to really gain a lot of new knowledge and that wisdom that that Kevin has been emphasizing. Basically from the aspect of learning, this is the whole thing. In education, you get to learn as a teacher. So that's been a great blessing in my life.
Well, and welcome, Diana. Good to see you as well. Diana joins us from Ireland. She's become a regular. And yeah, I think it just dawned on me, Sam, I think one of the reasons that you and I have really been able to gel in the education arena is that both of us came to education from a business background. That
Right.
we were not career educators from, get out of school and immediately go into education. And that's a different perspective on what education is about. And as a businessman, when I got into education, the K-12 system, it was really insightful to see. Now, what I did learn is I have just a very strong passion about our education and the education of young people, primarily not in the sense of institutional learning, but rather learning and helping our young people have opportunities to really seek and learn for themselves. And so, yeah, having a business perspective of education is very insightful. Makes us, I think, not think purely like an educator. Although, and I do want to share this, Sam and I were talking earlier and have talked before. I know that both of us have some strong feelings and thoughts in regards to the current education system. And just to make it clear that it is, our concerns are not so much directed towards the rank and file teachers. Teachers generally are some of the hardest working people I know and sacrificed a great deal to be teachers. And our concerns that we have are in regards to the education system itself and what it has become and what it has not become. And so welcome, Jaka Shen. Glad to have you this morning. Again, I apologize if I don't do well with your names. Please forgive me, but I try hard. And but I really appreciate all of you being here. And remember to also feel free to type in comments and questions in regards to what we're talking about today. You can type in other questions, comments, but prefer to kind of stay on target with education. And one of the things I was telling Sam, I don't normally come on the live wearing a t-shirt because I have respect for the conversation around wisdom and respect for the topics, but I had to wear, and I'm going to kind of try to let you see. This is a favorite shirt as a grandparent. It's something that my grandchildren gave to me, and I wear that with as much dignity and pride as anything. And so I share that simply because part of my passion related to education is about young people. I really have a desire and a passion to help them have the great opportunity to learn and rather than what one of my concerns is, the current education system stifles real learning in terms of true lifelong learning by the design of what we do. And so thanks, Manmeet. I appreciate that. That's my grandchildren call me Pop, and so that's the reference is to my grandfather name, and I appreciate it. So, you know, we talked a lot about some of the challenges with the education system and last time, and what I was hoping is that we can begin to talk about some alternatives, some different directions, and explore those choices, because as much as it seems that our primary choice for education is to go through a K-12 system, I know it varies a little bit from different places in the world, but there's a, if you will, a primary system, and then a secondary or post-secondary system. But the current model is that starting ever younger, I know in the U.S. that now attendance for education in the building starts as early as about 6 years old, which is I'm really concerned with, just to be honest with you, and goes through, you know, theoretically by 22 or 23 years old, we have, for those that are not going into a postgraduate required field, that's going to be their expected time in education, and unfortunately limited to, you know, I think part of the problem is that we are limiting education to those years or we're training our young people to think that that's when they get educated, and after that they're about with life. And I'm not sure that's a good mindset that we should have. Thank you, Daiko. Welcome aboard. And Rosemary, I appreciate you validating that K-12 is part of the Australian system. So, Sam, I know you and I have talked a great deal, and we discussed differing things. Your thoughts on alternate approaches and you know, observations there.
So the main question here for me has been the aspect of what is really driving education, as you were commenting, Kevin. I'm sure depending on who you talk to, everyone's going to have a different opinion as to what drives or what should drive education. And in thinking about the opportunities that are offered through this platform, for example, which is so wonderful because it is broad. We're tapping into folks that are across the globe, and one of my points of interest is to try to help identify how different people might be looking at education in terms of what ultimately what are we trying to do with it. So in my mind, one of the questions that I've had is in terms of comparing, you know, we look at, okay, a Western education, you know, and that system, how that developed, and you know, here in the U.S. is very, you know, is it unique? Is it not in comparison to other places? But again, what is the driver? What are we looking to gain? So I had and this has been one of my own questions throughout my experience in education, has been the aspect of innovation. So I had, you know, and what I bring to the table is no answer, no solution. I bring to the table more questions, and hopefully that will drive the discussion to where we can arrive at some new ideas. So I had some and thinking about how do we continue this conversation and alternatives and all that, try to look at how do we justify what our focus should be in education. And I just wanted to look at innovation, whether that is in effect a priori justification in terms of education, in terms of our ability to innovate, because nowadays obviously we're talking about sustainability, resilience, all these things that are all encompassing, and as far as not just our persons but as society altogether. And looking at it globally, we are we cannot ignore the reality of our global dependence, right? So if we're talking business, we're talking about supply chains, and we know how one little, we are only as strong as our weakest point, and that can definitely be in terms of the global, perspective. So, if and this is on my business brain, right? So if we're saying, hey, what's going to help society be productive, be sustainable, be resilient, whatever, is it the ability to innovate? And innovation is a little different, just creating, right? It's processing and going beyond the mark of just creating something, but taking knowledge from different areas and recycling that to new ways of doing things, new tools,
right,
etc. So I had two questions, and this is where
Sam, if you don't mind, Manmeet has a question directed for you, and I'd like to let's put that up there and let you address that question. Basically, he is asking about how you keep up with the current information and knowledge and so on.
Well, I'm old school because I'm old, so by default. So yeah, I always prefer hard copy and reading and all that. But definitely, the only way you can really keep tabs on publication is going to take a little while to get out there, and sometimes things are changing so rapidly that you're really having to rely on the latest and greatest, as digital format or whatever. So I would say I think it's probably a combination for me, because it's sometimes one of the difficulties I have actually is keeping track of how you organize information, because I keep hitting, online. I have bookmarks for everything. It's like, okay, I found this information. This is going to be useful. Okay, so let me bookmark that. And then the challenge comes in and try to remember. Okay, I know. There's something important. What keywords did I use? Okay, well, how do I go back and recapture that information? So that's one of the challenges for me, because there's so much out there, and it's really hard to keep track. But and I think in line with that, and when we're talking about how do we get our younger generations able to learn on their own, a lot of that is how do they know how to research? Do they know how to get online? Can they identify true true information as opposed to information that's been manipulated somehow? Can they get to the data, the facts, and go on from there? So.
A couple of shout outs. Welcome to Rafia. Rafia is one of my connections from Canada, and Rafia is actually involved in the education arena. So welcome and glad to have you. And let's see here, a couple of comments that have been made. And let's see. And by the way, when I am look like I am poking around and looking around, I promise you I am not distracted. I'm working with 3 screens here. But the other thing that's kind of peculiar about the live stream is some people's names don't show up in the live stream as they do on LinkedIn itself. Welcome, Karen. Glad to have you here this morning. Karen's a regular. But a comment that was shared by Diego is a quote from Nelson Mandela: "Education, the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And in fact, I have to echo that in some regards, because Sam and I were talking before going live about if you look at the history of education, that our U.S. education system was actually purposely co-opted by people that had a different agenda in it. And if you do some research back to the 50s, it's real insightful. So it is powerful, and it has been used and unfortunately abused over time. And also wanted to share a couple of comments from Rosemary that I wholeheartedly agree, is that at one time education and learning went hand in hand, but I don't think they do any longer. And we can talk about that at some point, but I agree with you. Education and learning, current environment is not the same. And what you're right, education should be the start of learning, but unfortunately, because we boxed it in my opinion, it is, well, we go through, we get our checkbox, get our degree, whatever, and then we go on with life, which is unfortunate priority. And then Sam, a good question from Rosemary to you that she wants you to, when you reference society, can you define that from your perspective?
Society. Well, I mean, we are society. Wow. I mean, our society is as now in today's terms. I have to again think globally. And there's this difficult because things get politicized. So and this is not to politicize on any type of agenda, but there's this term, and because terms get used and manipulated and all that, but the term a global citizen to me is one I can bring a whole bunch of again political agendas into it, but I think it is an interesting term in the practical matter of things, because again, going back to how do we perceive our society in terms of I would say society is humanity. Let's say that it's the presence of all of humanity interacting in real time. I mean, I'm just coming up with that.
It's good thoughts, because what's interesting and has been truly eye-opening for me is one initiative that I've gotten involved with, and by the way, looking for people to join the effort, is the International Internship University, and the fact that it is an education platform that is global. And the idea of that is truly remarkable, and we may get into a little more detail on that here in a few minutes. But and to Sam's point about innovation, it offers some innovative approaches, and so it's and the other challenge, by the way, and this is something cultural that we struggle with and have got to come to terms with, is yes, we are a global society, or all a part of humanity, but we have to remember that yes, we're aware of this global society and interact on some level, but where we live generally is right around us, and very few of us are living globally. we are living locally, and we've got to be sure and not to not miss the balance that needs to be in there. Let's see here. Wow.
Well, actually, just to interject with that, this is perhaps an important point. You can, some people think just in terms of the broader aspect, but you can't do anything on the broader aspect if you don't address on the local level. Everything starts at the grassroots for me, you know, and you've built on from there. It is you, you know, so I think that's.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, hang on to that for a second. Want to come back after highlighting a couple of comments. Let's see here. Deika, who commented that from his perspective, learning is dependent on us, and education is dependent on others about us. And I agree with that, and I think it has brought some value, but also created some of its own inherent problems. And then Diego comments that he believes that it's time for changes in the education system. Don't think you'll get any argument out of Sam and I in that regard at all. And then a question from Jakishan. Again, I apologize if I ruin or mispronounce your name. I try real hard, but thanks for being with us. His question is, in the current pandemic situation, what is the best way you suggest for continual learning? And it's a great question. I think the challenge is, first of all, I've complained that we have put learning in jail with our education system. And I think one of the first steps is that we've got to help people, young people especially, to understand that learning is not constricted to what someone else teaches us. And then for my generation, us older folks, we have to help them get a mindset of learning is a continual process, because we were very much a product of you go through school and then go on with life. And so we just, I think the initial part is change the mindset and get everyone to become curious, including even needing to know that, you know, an example I give, and Sam, you'll identify with this construction example, and that is back in when I was coming along younger, building was, especially residential building, you had someone called a builder, and they would come in and construct a house, and generally they would bring one team in, and the whole one team would build the whole thing, every aspect, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, all of it. Well, that was then. Now we have, generally speaking, contractors. And what they're doing is, rather than most contractors do very little of the hands-on themselves, they are contracting with other people, bringing people in to construct something. The point is that at the time when we were builders, you could learn a set of skills and they would carry you through even a lifetime. Well, the current culture, we can't learn a set of skills and rely on it for a lifetime. We are in a situation where we've got to make sure that we approach learning as something we need to be doing the rest of our life. So it's got to be some mind shift to keep up. And during, I'm sorry, Sam, I'm going to make sure I answer the question.
Yeah, there's a lot coming in.
Yeah, the continual learning, the value of the internet is the opportunity to access learning information. So your question is, current pandemic situation, way to continue learning. is the use of the internet in a positive sense. And so to answer your
Yes.
question, Jake Shannon, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, and that's what you hit right. You hit the nail right on the head when it comes to curiosity. If we can achieve as educators, putting ourselves as educators, if we can achieve that situation where people are curious, that's all you need. You just need to be curious. There's no limitations. We can say, oh, the pandemic is inhibiting my opportunity to learn. That's not the case. If you are curious, you are going to find a way to learn. I've heard stories of young men and women in countries or situations where they have had, for example, one example was this young gentleman that would travel miles, I think on a bicycle, just to get to a place where he could have internet access. And then he would just, and then when this, and you could ask him anything, this young man just was self-taught, just out of, he had a thirst for knowledge. So if you have that curiosity, that thirst for knowledge, you really can't think in terms of I'm limited in any way, particularly in our society nowadays. I mean, for goodness sake, anywhere you go, there's something to be learned. I know people that go to YouTube and they learn all kinds of different things on YouTube. They pick it up like that. The young people are incredible. And I say, oh my gosh. And actually, I've seen that it actually motivates them to be more hands-on when that happens, which I think is also very beneficial.
Sure. Yeah, because if you can, again, when talking about the wisdom journey, okay, it doesn't stop with knowledge. Unfortunately, we have taught a couple of generations now that knowledge is power. You can have all the knowledge in the world. If you can't do anything with it, then you're not going to have a whole lot of power. Virginia makes a great comment here, and that is we should always keep an open mind and assume that people from other countries have the same understanding or know the same things as we do. We should always ask questions, be curious. She corrected herself and said not assume that others have the same understanding. Virginia and I work together in an effort in Perspective Force, and Virginia is an amazing one to bring a broader perspective, and I appreciate that. Yes, as we approach education, consider that it is not the same all over. It's got some similarities, but we have to keep in mind that part of it, okay, and I'm going to kind of jump off on this a little bit, is to your point about innovation and to some of the conversation, the other problem that I see in education that I think is fairly universal is that we are locked into a production model for education. We're trying to push people through almost an assembly line process and to get them to reach this achievement of a diploma, a degree, whatever, and we as a result are not leaving room for differences in people, differences in situations, differences in cultures. And so I think that is another challenge that we face.
Well, exactly. And going back, putting on the business brain, right? And talking about innovation, what gives you a competitive edge in terms of being able to grow, to survive, to thrive? Not even sometimes it's more a matter of survival, but really what you're looking for is thriving and growing. And if you look at in the business environment, what enriches us? It is not one perspective. It is not one way of looking at things. What enriches us, what gives us best value is when we have different ideas. When we're sharing ideas, we have different perspectives. We take into account the aspects of the different cultures that we come from that actually mold our thinking. And this is the sort of thing that gives you, it opens your mind to different ways of thinking. When a good business models are always reliant on diverse structure of people, participants. It's not one mindset. Every time you get locked into just doing things one way, then you're not growing. You're not again. This is why I will repeat, in this type of platform, you can see how people they get engaged and all that. That's what we want, because we're all looking to learn. We're all looking to extract knowledge and that wisdom. That's how it comes about. So yes, that's it's all about that shared information, and we are so fortunate to have that available to us, because of technology, really, at the end of the day, that we didn't have in the past.
Well, and interesting. Let's see. Trying to. I love to hear from you guys that are joining us. The different perspectives, and always great. By the way, welcome, Gabrielle. Appreciate you being here also. And let's see, a quote. I believe Deco shared this one. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. Yeah, learning has to be a ongoing process. And then let's see. It's really interesting. I'm looking back and forth between these two screens to make sure of the names because of the breakdown of technology.
Kevin, I think you've opened Pandora's box with education, and you're going to have to do an entire series.
Well, if this helps us to grow and learn and make progress, by golly, let's do it. I'm ready to. Great quote: "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." Certainly, because it starts a process of wisdom. And then Petra, thank you. Appreciate that you're sharing from a neuroscientist standpoint, brain, looking at the brain and its function and how it part of learning. Certainly, we need to consider real science. And then this is another great quote that Deco shares: "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively, to think critically, and intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education." And yes, we can't just focus on IQ. To put it in some current terms, we've got to think IQ and EQ, and then there is different types of learning intelligence, and all of these are things that our current education models quite often don't take into account. And then let's see, from Gabrielle, comment: "I think we need to change the current paradigm to encompass the concepts of empathy, compassion, value of building relationships, using art and music as a form of communication," and so on. And I think one of the things that came out of our last session was that, again, that education needs to be holistic. And unfortunately, current system is not truly holistic. It is very narrow in many ways, although it does give some credence to a broader concept and world, but by function, it tends to be narrow rather than broad, and needs to be more holistic. And so definitely, let's see here. Just want to make sure. So many great comments, and and this is from Delgado. I think the current paradigm needs to include learning around, same concept, the holistic approach. Rosemary is someone that I have come to appreciate because she is thinks in a broader scope like I do, and that in fact, yes, it is has become an excuse. But what's interesting, the pandemic, I think, is one of the things it has done is it has really pointed out the challenges and limitations that we have put on education. Because, the struggle to continue learning with the buildings not available. That points to me, the fact that has been such a disruption points to one of the very problems. What do you think, Sam?
No, absolutely. I think the pandemic, you have to look at what's the silver lining, even in such a terrible state that we might find ourselves. But if there's one thing I think the pandemic has done is provide an opportunity for introspection. We've maybe talked about this sort of thing before. How often do we take the time to meditate, to sit alone by ourselves, and consider what is going on around us? We're just busybodies running around like chickens without a head. And I don't know that this is kind of like a Cuban thing, running around like a chicken without a head, and we don't take the time for introspection, and that is so critical. And in doing introspection, you learn that's that learning process. So you might become more curious now that you have some time. Hey, I got to do something. I'm cooped up in a room somewhere. I can't go anywhere. Whatever. What are you gonna do? You're gonna sit down and fiddle with your thumbs. So that's a great opportunity to learn, and I think that's one of the great things about the pandemic. And you mentioned the word disruption. Yeah, but you mentioned the word disruption, and we do need disruption in our lives, obviously, to kind of shake us up and get us to wake up sometimes to some certain realities that we might be ignoring because we're just too busy doing other stuff.
Well, welcome, Scott. Scott's one of our regulars to the Wisdom Seeker program. Glad to have you. And a couple of other comments that are, again, insightful is from Rosemary. With the internet, it is now possible to tap into a multitude of learning places. And in fact, Rosemary is an example of parents and grandparents doing what they should and owning the education of their children, grandchildren. And that means taking the time to work with them. And she talks about using the internet to help with the learning process and learn debating. And so the use of the internet as part of the learning process now is so key. And then let's see. Rosemary also shares silver lining of the pandemic allowed us to step back and see false direction. Yeah, it has forced us to take stock. And then Karen's comment, internet as a plethora of information. However, we need discernment. Wow, such a powerful statement, Karen.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we do have to be cautious, and I think Sam alluded to this earlier, is helping ourselves and others to be discerning about information found. And I even suggest that I go back to the original challenge we started with in January: disconnect from the noise and observe, seek and gain wisdom. But the observation process is to evaluate, okay, just because it's out there in public view in some media source, is it true and accurate? And I think That's, in fact, boy, I'm trying not to chase a rabbit here, but part of the byproduct of wisdom is discernment, which is what Karen references, is that we need discernment in our lives on a daily basis. And the unfortunate problem is that wisdom is not considered a premium. And as a result, we have lost a lot of discernment with our current generations. And not that the older generations had it all figured out, but we did have a greater sense of discernment, I believe, because of having, life was a very tough teacher. And without some of the current benefits, it forced us to gain some wisdom and some discernment.
And in terms of discernment, we could mention Wikipedia, for example, as an open source knowledge, right? So we have Wikipedia, and presumably that is everyone's contributing to that, or anyone can contribute to that to expand knowledge. But they are supposedly need to provide the support for that information. But when we're faced with something like that, we have to look at, particularly in the K through 12, right, environment, we have to let kids understand, hey, that's maybe a starting point. That's not, it's very easy to say, oh, I'll look it up on Wikipedia, and there you go. Right. You need that. That's where you need that discernment, because you need to understand that, okay, where's this coming from? So that's one example. But I think the general idea of open source knowledge, that ties back to, how do we take advantage of the so much that's out there in terms of different people's experience and all that. But ultimately, we need to look at the factual material and go on from there. I don't know that we have a philosophy-pedia of sorts, but maybe we should. I don't know.
I think that another part of what we're talking about, and welcome, Ricky. Glad to have you from right here in Georgia. Appreciate you being a regular. But what we're talking about here is, again, this concept of going beyond just knowledge. Okay, knowledge is great. And the problem with the situation we face now is so much of what we do is knowledge-based. Academia has become built and around knowledge, and which is a good starting point, but it doesn't continue further. For example, I know that Sam and I have worked in the career areas in education. And one of the markers of the career education is that it goes beyond just learning knowledge. A built-in component of it is having to apply what you use in certain situations. And for Sam, with construction management, you had to take your understanding of facts and figures and information and say, okay, well, if we're going to have this information, but we need to do a project, how do you do that? And forcing to be thinking beyond just the information that goes on the test. Welcome, Bob from Texas. Bob, I don't know, Sam, you may have actually met Bob. He was here more in our area before, was involved in Skills USA. And all, he was a big supporter. So welcome, Bob. And yes, goes to the concept of competency. And part of the challenge we face, current education model, is it is not based in competency, which simple version of competence is takes knowledge, information, and combine it with skill. That's how you become competent. I want to get back to another comment or question. This was from Daiko, and I think it is also insightful. says more IQ gives us low EQ. Do you believe that? And what I would say is that the focus on IQ, intelligence, which to me is based primarily in academic thought, not just broader thought, not just application, is that what we should be doing is it shouldn't be primarily focused on IQ or even EQ, because if we focus strictly on EQ, there would be trouble from that. We have to assume that it's all part of that, and going back to that holistic approach to education. Well, I'm watching our time, so because I want to also share some differing alternatives as we go out. And but yes, thanks. This has been great conversation, and Sam, it may be something I need to continue on down the road.
We need to add some more participants.
Could be. We might expand our panel a little bit. But so as we've talked about, let's talk about some alternatives. Current model, you take someone as early as about 6 years old and you put them into this system that we call education, and they continue, and the first real milestone is the completion of the K-12 or primary learning environment. And then the idea that is promoted within the education system is then you transition to post-secondary or university level education. And then after you do that, you move into life or additional education depending on career direction. That's the model and the primary method. But what I think we need to consider is that, especially at the high school level forward, there are a number of possible ways to approach it differently than what we're doing. And that is, for example, in the high school, latter part of high school, even looking at internships and looking at exploration by young people in different areas that they think they want to be in, using work study, using what's called youth apprenticeship, and began to explore and look before we make that big decision about an education process. Yes, dual enrollment is another concept that is out there. And I mentioned apprenticeship. It was really interesting. I was talking last week with a group about apprenticeships. What a lot of people don't understand is that in our education world, in recent history, it's not that far back, even the so-called professional careers were apprenticed. Lawyers, doctors, all of those were apprenticed. They weren't dependent on academic formal education to get you in there. You were able to demonstrate your interest, your abilities, and then get someone to agree to apprentice you. And we still have that current model available. It's not so much so with some of the areas, but in other areas. So apprenticeships is another alternative to go with. Sam, your thoughts on other alternatives?
Well, I think apprenticeships are definitely of great value, and there are a couple different models. I know, I think in Germany, I did not have an opportunity to actually be part of that, but I remember when I was at the technical college system, the program director, I believe, had an opportunity to go and attend a workshop in Germany where they introduced that concept. And I don't know that it ever got anywhere, really, but the main idea of that was, if I understand it correctly, the apprenticeship becomes the first source of gaining that knowledge, and then it is supported by coming back to the school environment. So I don't think you can totally eliminate the two, in the sense that you need your theory, right? So you need to. One of the things that I know from in the business world is just because people do things a certain way doesn't, and they've managed to keep doing it and still be around as a business, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing it correctly or the most efficient way possible. So you need that theoretical knowledge that actually comes from practice, because at the end of the day, at least if you're looking at it in terms of business, we are learning. We have case studies. Okay, so here are your case studies. This is one of the things we do in higher ed, right? So we learn from those situations that have actually happened, and that serves as our knowledge base to do things. But yeah, internships are definitely of great value. I think it really provides an opportunity for people to get exposed. That's another thing that's lacking in the system. If you don't, we make life-changing decisions without really being exposed to it. If you consider, I'm going to go. Once you make that decision, I'm going to do this, and then you go out there, you graduate, you get your degree, you're all excited, you go out there, and then you say, holy moly, this is not what I really want to do. I don't like this at all. Now what? Now you have to totally change your entire, so that's a great opportunity, a great value in internships, that it gives you an opportunity to kind of hands-on be exposed to an environment that, you're going to be committed to for a certain amount of time. Anyway, we don't think in terms of our 30 years anymore as a career. I mean, our career track is based on different things that we're going to be doing in today's world. It's not,
Well, and yes, what's an interesting and scary statistic is that I think it's 70% of people with bachelor's degrees aren't working using those bachelor degrees in the field of their career choice. And that's scary, because it's gotten us along, but my question is, could it have been much better had it been more targeted? And then Petra makes an interesting concept, because I know Europe has the apprenticeship model more as part, but what he talks about, apprenticeship can lead up to higher level in Germany, and start with one and go to another. And another alternative perspective is, we need to stop assuming that the best path for our young people currently is to go through this process, K-12 to university to career. In current circumstances, for many of our young people, the best process is to get to a point where they are functionally literate and effectively literate, and then spend some time in the real world, checking out careers, exploring. And then if they determine that they are interested and it's where they're more driven and purposeful, then they pursue additional education later. And I can give lots of examples of how that works and works good. And one of the alternatives in that regard is to look at young people that go into the military. What a lot of people don't realize is the military offers just about every job that's in the civilian world. Some young people are going to be best served to get into the military in their country and learn and experience and grow some, and also find out some of the areas of interest that they can through that military. I do want to mention, wow, great comments, everyone, and I love the engagement, and we'll definitely have to revisit this topic further. A couple of alternatives is I have to give a shout out to a friend and a fellow educator, and that is Dr. Addison Zhang, who has now started an alternate approach, and that is called Classroom Without Walls. Check it out. One that we haven't talked about, but I believe is a great viable option, especially in the primary area, is homeschooling. And I'm not talking about what we were forced into, where we tried to move the current education model in the home through our computers. I'm talking about true homeschooling. And then another, and I have to shout out this and share this, and that is International Internship University. We're working on the initiative to offer post-secondary level education that will be accessible to many, and it will have credibility. And the key to that is that it will also be available for little or no cost to those that need it. And so there are a lot of different alternatives. Don't assume that we need to start at the K-12 level and move immediately into university, and don't assume that all education occurs in buildings somewhere. There is a much greater and sense of learning. Personally, because of the limited approach of the brick and mortar education, I did more of my learning out in life and when I was given the opportunity to explore my curiosity with things. And even as a child, I loved to take things apart and put them back together. And as a result, today I can, if it's a type of machinery or even with computers, I can generally, even if I don't know it, I can figure it out and fix it. It's just, I've been blessed to get a chance to explore it. So any closing thought there, Sam? So we wrap it up, and wow, time flies.
Yeah, it's been great. Uh, that's what it's all about. You have engagement, and people are curious. See, yeah, everyone's curious about learning from what others are doing. Again, it's thank you, Kevin. I think we all you deserve a lot of kudos for providing this venue, because it's going to help a lot of folks, and I think we're going to discover and gain that wisdom that we're striving for from just having this opportunity. So just want to say kudos to you and the mission that you've undertaken here, and I'm sure everyone is going to echo that.
Well, I hope that people will join each Monday morning, 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, and bring people along. Love the engagement, and encourage folks to join in the conversation. This is not just about me sharing my thoughts. It's about us pursuing wisdom, seeking and gaining wisdom together. So thanks, everyone. Have an amazing week, and I hope to see you next week. I will get word out, but my thought is we may have to continue some conversation around education, because it continues to be a topic that we need to discuss and come to some conclusions on. Thanks, everybody. Sam, thanks so much for
giving you, everybody.
Time. Really appreciate it, and we will hopefully seek and gain wisdom together. Take care. God bless.